The horizon was a pale, trembling line between sea and sky, barely distinguishable in the pre-dawn haze. The waters were calm but deceptive, hiding the tension that had gripped the USS Iowa for days. Every sailor aboard moved with precision born of years of training, yet the weight of anticipation hung like a dense fog over the deck. Men checked one another's work, as if instinct demanded a second look. Every bolt tightened, every dial scrutinized, every turret carefully adjusted. Captain Thomas Harrington, 51, a veteran of 2 decades at sea, stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back, eyes scanning the grey expanse. His face, weathered by sun, salt, and wind, betrayed no emotion, yet inside, a storm of thoughts churned. The Japanese fleet was near, somewhere beyond the horizon, their carriers, cruisers, and destroyers plotting a strike against American positions. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Harrington did not fear them. Fear was a luxury he had long since discarded, but he respected their skill and knew that without the edge of technology, this battle could become a blind duel. He inhaled the briny air, letting it fill his lungs, steadying himself for the confrontation that would unfold with the first light of day. The new radar systems had changed everything. Type 273 and Type 284 were more than tools. They were extensions of human senses, invisible guides that transformed uncertainty into knowledge. The Type 273 was the all-seeing eye, sweeping tirelessly across the horizon for any surface contact, while the Type 284 calculated ranges for the main guns, feeding precise echoes into the fire control system to guide each barrel with deadly accuracy. Sailors manning these stations had spent months learning to interpret signals, to distinguish fleeting blips from noise, to act with the confidence that every reading had meaning. When an echo was detected, it would be tracked, plotted, calculated, and transformed into gun elevation and bearing almost instantly, converting invisible energy into tangible lethal results. To the Japanese, who relied primarily on eyesight and manual calculations, this invisible advantage would seem like sorcery when the first salvo struck. Lieutenant James Carson, 37 Fire Control Officer, leaned over the plotting table, his fingers tracing chalk lines that represented distant enemy ships. Bearings, ranges, and projected speeds were etched with precision on large boards, each mark a potential target, each calculation a silent message to the men below who prepared the ship's enormous guns. "All stations ready," he called, his voice carrying across the bridge and down to the gunnery crews. The hum of machinery and the rhythmic footfalls of sailors responded in kind, creating a prelude to the thunder that would soon follow. Carson's eyes flicked between the radar screens and the plotting table, a seamless bridge between unseen energy and human action. Every decision mattered. Every delay could cost lives. Below decks, the main turrets were alive with activity. The 16-inch guns, massive and forbidding, rested like sleeping giants in their armored enclosures. Each shell, over 2,000 pounds of solid steel, waited to be loaded, a testament to the raw destructive power that the ship could unleash. Chief Gunner Samuel Whitaker, 44, barked orders as sailors maneuvered the hydraulic lifts, carefully positioning the shells into the breaches. The smell of gun oil, sweat, and iron filled the turret, mingling with the tension that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the ship itself. Every lever pulled, every gauge read, every lock engaged was an affirmation of preparedness. Whitaker's eyes, sharp and calculating, missed nothing. "Check the fuses. Secure the breaches. No mistakes," he commanded. Each crew member obeyed with practiced precision, knowing that their lives and those of their comrades depended on flawless execution. On the bridge, Harrington's gaze swept the horizon, searching for the first sign of the enemy. Though the sea was deceptively calm, he knew the currents of war ran beneath its surface, hidden yet potent. His mind rehearsed strategies, anticipated maneuvers, and considered contingencies. Every possible angle of approach, every potential target had been mapped in his head, yet he trusted the radar to confirm or deny the assumptions. The invisible signals bouncing back from distant hulls would become their eyes, guiding shells that no human hand could direct alone. He tapped a finger lightly against the railing, listening to the mechanical symphony of dials, levers, and engines, knowing that this silent orchestra would soon produce a violent crescendo. The sailors, young and old alike, carried out their roles with disciplined focus. Thomas Reed, just 20 years old and barely 6 feet tall, loaded shells under Whitaker's watchful eye. His hands moved quickly but deliberately, ensuring that no shell was misaligned. The repetitive motion, heavy and exhausting, would continue for hours once the engagement began. Yet, for now, it was anticipation and training that guided him. Beside him, fellow loaders adjusted hydraulic pressures, monitored lubrication levels, and double-checked the alignment of each gun. Each movement was part of a larger choreography, a dance of precision that would become deadly in moments. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Carson adjusted the plotting table, his mind working at the speed of calculation. He measured distances, projected courses, and calculated lead angles. The radar had made these calculations almost instantaneous. Yet, human oversight was crucial. "Bearing 315, he called, though no enemy ship was yet visible to the naked eye. "Range 27,000 yards. The words carried down to the turrets like a signal, an invisible chain linking observation to action. Each gun crew absorbed the information, set their sights, and waited, the stillness before the storm stretching taut across the decks. From the enemy perspective, the sea appeared ordinary, the horizon smooth and unbroken. Japanese lookouts scanned the grey waters, seeing nothing, yet feeling the weight of vigilance. They could not know that the Iowa's radar had already detected them, had already calculated every approach, and would guide destruction toward them with near-perfect accuracy. Experience and instinct would be of limited use against a technology that could see what eyes could not. Soon, what appeared to be a tranquil morning would erupt in controlled chaos, and the consequences of underestimating invisible forces would be immediate and catastrophic. Back on the Iowa, the officers continued their silent preparations. Harrington reviewed the fire control diagrams once more, ensuring that each coordinate corresponded perfectly with the radar inputs. Every correction, every adjustment was logged mentally, ready to be implemented at a moment's notice. "Main guns, stand by," he ordered softly, the words meant as a signal to himself as much as to the crew. The ship seemed to respond to the tension. A massive entity, coiled and ready, steel and fire tempered by human skill. The sailors moved like cogs in an intricate machine, yet each one carried the weight of responsibility. One misstep could cascade into disaster, and the memory of past engagements reminded them of the cost of error. Time seemed to stretch, measured by the subtle changes in light, as dawn slowly conquered night. The grey mist over the ocean shifted from silver to pale blue, revealing waves that caught the weak sunlight. The Iowa, massive and immovable, cut a silent silhouette against the dim horizon. Above, gulls cried and dipped, indifferent to the human anxieties below. On the bridge, Harrington's eyes narrowed as the faintest ripples of radar signals appeared, like tiny whispers from the hidden world beyond vision. He studied them with care, interpreting each echo, each blip, as if reading the pulse of the ocean itself. The Type 273 and Type 284 systems would transform these signals into action, converting what was invisible into measurable, deadly precision. Every sailor aboard knew the significance of what was about to happen. They had trained for this moment, yet the magnitude of the task was overwhelming. They were the instruments of a larger strategy, each movement synchronized with countless others, each calculation feeding the rhythm of destruction yet to come. The anticipation was a living presence, pressing down on the deck, rising in the echo of footsteps and vibrating through the steel of the ship. The Iowa was awake, aware, and prepared, a sleeping giant stirred by unseen knowledge, ready to unleash force beyond imagination. As the horizon lightened further, the first blips solidified into identifiable shapes. Enemy vessels approached cautiously, unaware of the eyes that had already found them. Harrington remained calm, though his mind raced through contingencies. Each officer, each sailor, had rehearsed their responses countless times. Yet, the reality of engagement was never rehearsed enough. The magnitude of the Iowa's firepower, the precision of the radar systems, and the discipline of its crew combined into an invisible force that would soon manifest in devastating reality. Every shell loaded, every turret adjusted, and every plot calculated was a testament to the fusion of human skill and technological innovation. Captain Harrington exhaled slowly, his gaze fixed on the faint shapes of the enemy through binoculars. There was no exhilaration, no rush of adrenaline that could distract him. Instead, there was clarity, a calm understanding that the Iowa, its crew, and its unseen eyes were ready. The pre-dawn calm would not last long, but, for now, there was preparation, anticipation, and absolute control. The giant was awake. The edge of technology had been honed into a weapon, and soon, the world beyond the horizon would understand the power of precision, discipline, and sight unseen. At precisely 0600 hours, the Type 273 radar operator's voice cut through the morning hush with clear precision. Echo bearing 310, range 27,000 yards, sir. The words, calm yet urgent, spread across the bridge like a spark, igniting a carefully stacked fuse. Captain Thomas Harrington, 51, stood motionless for a heartbeat, then nodded once, a slight movement that carried the weight of command and decades of experience at sea. He did not need to speak further. His officers understood. Lieutenant James Carson, 37 Fire Control Officer, quickly fed the data into the fire control table, fingers moving over the dials and charts with the fluidity of someone who had spent years translating invisible signals into deadly trajectories. The director control tower shifted subtly, adjusting the alignment of the main guns, while below deck, turret crews began the slow, deliberate turning of the massive 16-inch barrels to track targets that the naked eye could not yet see. Each crewman was a cog in a colossal, coordinated machine, and each cog understood that perfection was not optional. The Japanese fleet sailed with a confidence born of tradition and past victories, unaware that the eyes of the Iowa had already pierced their illusions. On the bridge of a heavy cruiser, the enemy captain, a man of 52, squinted into the morning mist, the rising sun glinting off the steel hulls around him. "Where are they hiding?" he muttered, voice tense. "No radar detected. No scouting planes. Nothing." His uncertainty was subtle but real, a ripple of unease through the otherwise disciplined crew. Below him, officers exchanged nervous glances, their hands tightening on binoculars and charts, trying to anticipate an adversary that had not yet revealed itself. What they did not know, and could not have imagined, was that the USS Iowa had already plotted the trajectory, speed, and likely maneuvers of each of their vessels, calculations made in seconds and adjusted in real time with the precision of cold, analytical logic. The enemy was sailing blind, their confidence misplaced against a technology they neither understood nor anticipated. "Fire control! Begin initial salvo," Harrington commanded, his voice cutting through the charged air. The response was immediate, disciplined, and precise. Below decks, the turret crews synchronized their actions, heavy shells moving into the breaches like pieces of a massive lethal puzzle. Each 16-inch round, over 2,000 pounds of solid steel, roared from the gun as hydraulics hissed and steam escaped, smoke curling into the cold morning air. Flame spitted across the deck as the barrels recoiled, then settled back into position, ready for the next command. The Type 273 radar monitored each shot, feeding back corrections to Lieutenant Carson, who made adjustments with small, deliberate twists of a dial, elevation, bearing, range, every variable considered, every factor accounted for. Wind, the curvature of the Earth, and the unpredictable maneuvers of enemy vessels were compensated for almost instantly, and the Iowa's guns fired again, relentless, precise, unstoppable. The pre-dawn calm had vanished, replaced by the deep, resonant thunder of naval artillery, each salvo a sentence written in smoke and steel. Japanese lookouts perched high above the deck were the first to witness the results, their eyes widening in disbelief as their formations were shredded. One cruiser erupted in fire, flames curling upward as the hull splintered under repeated impact. A second vessel, attempting evasive maneuvers, shuddered violently under the impact of a shell that had anticipated its every move. Confusion spread like wildfire. Officers shouted orders that came too late, guns fired into empty water, shells detonating harmlessly against the waves. They had believed themselves safe from unseen attacks, confident that absence of visual contact ensured security. But the radar, invisible and tireless, had proven them wrong. Hulls burned, decks collapsed, and the sharp tang of smoke drifted across the rising sun, painting the morning in tones of chaos and destruction. It was a transformation of the battlefield, an unseen hand turning confidence into panic within moments. Lieutenant Carson's hands did not waver. His eyes, sharp behind round spectacles, flicked between the Type 273 screen and the fire control table, a bridge of logic between machine and action. The strobe pulse indicated each radar return, a fleeting flash that carried volumes of information. "Adjust range minus 600 yards, bearing 310.2, he called, and the turret crews complied without hesitation. Each correction was subtle but precise, each adjustment magnifying the destructive efficiency of the next salvo. Line spotting operators reported every impact, shouting distances and coordinates that were immediately integrated into the fire control system, creating a feedback loop that made each subsequent round deadlier than the last. Within 3 minutes, over 60 shells had struck their targets, each explosion an affirmation of the Iowa's supremacy, each crater a testament to invisible calculation made tangible. The Japanese officers struggled to comprehend what was happening. They had no visual confirmation, no time to maneuver effectively, and no ability to predict the invisible mechanisms guiding their destruction. Orders were issued, yet most were impossible to execute. Guns fired blindly, smoke filled the air, and ships that had once been symbols of naval might were now burning hulks adrift in the cold sea. The Iowa's radar system turned anticipation into certainty, sight unseen into devastating reality. Hulls twisted, decks buckled, and crewmen clung desperately to railings and beams, their confidence shattered by a weapon they could neither see nor fully understand. It was not courage or skill that had undone them, but the relentless, invisible hand of technology that had already mastered their every potential maneuver. On the Iowa, the bridge and turrets moved with mechanical grace, the human element tempered by technology. Every officer, every sailor understood their role. Yet their understanding was amplified by instruments that extended their perception far beyond human limits. Harrington's eyes remained fixed on the horizon, watching for changes, noting patterns, anticipating shifts. Each radar echo was a pulse of information, each correction a silent dialogue with unseen adversaries. The 16-inch guns, massive and unforgiving, remained ready, each loaded shell a silent threat, each recoil a measured response to an invisible calculus. Time itself seemed suspended, measured not in seconds but in pulses of strobe light and the thundering cadence of gunfire. The Japanese fleet's confusion became apparent in their communications, garbled messages between vessels indicating frustration and disbelief. "What is guiding their fire?" an officer shouted, voice cracking over the ship's internal communications. Another tried to coordinate evasive maneuvers, yet every course adjustment seemed anticipated, every angle predicted. They were outmatched, not by human skill, but by an unseen algorithm of war, a combination of radar signals, calculations, and trained hands working in perfect harmony. The Iowa's technology had turned perception into power, information into destruction, and anticipation into certainty. It was a lesson in modern naval warfare, a brutal demonstration of the advantages conferred by innovation and discipline. Smoke hung low over the water, mingling with the morning mist in a surreal dance of light and shadow. The sound of artillery was punctuated by the distant cries of the enemy, orders shouted across decks, and the crackle of fires consuming once proud ships. Below decks, crewmen of the Iowa moved shells into position, checked hydraulic systems, and monitored the alignment of each turret. Chief Gunner Samuel Whitaker, 44, barked instructions that were followed without question, his voice rising above the roar of the guns. Each movement was rehearsed, yet, in the reality of battle, it had become instinct. Each motion, a small part of the larger, precise machine of war. The discipline and coordination of the crew amplified the effectiveness of the technology guiding them, creating a force multiplier that no single enemy ship could withstand. Harrington's mind raced through potential outcomes, even as the salvo continued. He calculated the potential for survivors, assessed the likelihood of additional enemy reinforcements, and considered the structural limitations of his own vessel. Every possibility had been rehearsed, every scenario anticipated, yet the reality of combat required real-time adjustments, decisions made in fractions of a second, with consequences magnified by the immense firepower at his disposal. The radar allowed for these adjustments, but human judgment remained critical. Harrington's calm presence on the bridge steadied his crew, a silent reassurance that their training and technology were sufficient to meet the challenge. The Iowa was not merely a ship, it was a synthesis of human skill, technological innovation, and disciplined coordination, a living testament to the evolution of naval warfare. As the morning sun continued to rise, the Japanese fleet was reduced to a chaotic collection of burning, drifting vessels. Smoke spiraled upward in towering columns, painting the horizon in shades of grey and orange. Survivors clung to lifeboats and debris, some attempting to return fire with guns that could no longer make an impact. The Iowa's radar guided the final adjustments of the salvo, ensuring maximum destruction while minimizing risk to its own crew. Lieutenant Carson and his team moved with tight efficiency, monitoring strobe pulses, correcting ranges, and maintaining the flow of information that had rendered the enemy powerless. Each impact was recorded, each trajectory analyzed, and the feedback loop continued unabated, turning data into tangible dominance over a fleet that had believed itself untouchable. By 0630 hours, the engagement had reached a decisive conclusion. Over 100 shells had found their targets, each one confirming the superiority of technology integrated seamlessly with human expertise. The Iowa's crew, disciplined and methodical, had executed their orders flawlessly, while the Japanese fleet lay in disarray, struggling to comprehend a power beyond their comprehension. The battle, brief yet devastating, was a testament to preparation, coordination, and the decisive advantage conferred by innovation. Harrington allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection, knowing that the morning's success was not the result of chance but of calculation, skill, and the tireless vigilance of those under his command. The echoes of radar, the thunder of 16-inch guns, and the fires consuming enemy vessels would linger long in memory, a record of the power unleashed when discipline met technological foresight. Minutes blurred into chaos, yet within the controlled disorder of the USS Iowa, every action was deliberate, measured, and lethal. The Type 273 radar continued to sweep tirelessly across the grey, expansive sea, capturing the faintest echoes of enemy vessels and transmitting them instantly to the bridge. Each blip was transformed into actionable intelligence as Lieutenant James Carson, 37 Fire Control Officer, manipulated dials and charts, converting invisible signals into precise firing solutions. Every echo detected, whether from a distant cruiser or a battleship attempting evasive maneuvers, was relayed to the director tower, its data fed into the massive computational heart of the fire control system. Turrets rotated with deliberate smoothness, hydraulic pistons hissing and releasing pressure as each 16-inch gun aligned on targets invisible to human eyes. Within minutes, the roar of ordnance filled the air, smoke curling skyward, punctuated by the thunderous recoil that vibrated through the deck and into the bones of every crewman aboard. By the 5th minute, over 120 shells had hammered the enemy lines, each impact precise and devastating. The deck beneath their feet trembled with the vibrations of repeated blasts, the smell of gunpowder thick and choking, intermingling with the salt-laden air and curling smoke from burning ships. Captain Thomas Harrington, 51, eyes sharp behind rimmed spectacles, scanned the horizon with a mixture of calculation and solemn awareness. His gaze measured the devastation unfolding in real time. A cruiser broken in half, a battleship aflame, smaller destroyers listing and trailing smoke. Their once proud formations, now chaotic and scattered. One Japanese battleship, larger than any other vessel in its division, attempted a sudden course change, the steel frame groaning under the strain. But it was already too late. The Iowa's radar-guided guns anticipated every movement before it occurred, adjusting elevation and bearing with uncanny precision. Shells exploded with brutal accuracy, puncturing hulls, shearing decks, and sending plumes of water skyward as they detonated near armored bulkheads. Sailors on deck whispered to one another almost reverently, faces pale, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and controlled fear. They had trained for this moment their entire lives, drilled endlessly in scenarios where reaction time and precision meant survival. Yet even they could not fully grasp the surreal magnitude of what they were witnessing. Over 200 shells fired in just 8 minutes, every single one finding its mark, a torrent of fire delivered with relentless perfection. The Japanese sailors, caught in a nightmare of invisible gunnery, scrambled desperately to respond. Orders were shouted, voices cracking with urgency. Return fire! Maneuver! Adjust course! Focus your batteries! Their captains barked commands over the chaos, but every effort was rendered futile. Optical rangefinders, once the cornerstone of naval targeting, were rendered useless by the early morning haze, smoke curling across the decks, and the rapid, unpredictable adjustments of the Iowa's guns. Radar-directed fire, an unseen and nearly magical weapon to them, had turned conventional tactics on their head. American ships moved like ghosts over the grey waves, delivering destruction with terrifying accuracy while appearing impervious to return fire. Japanese officers could only watch in disbelief, faces etched with a mixture of anger, fear, and helpless comprehension as vessels burned, twisted, and sank before their eyes. The dissonance between expectation and reality left them paralyzed. Even well-trained crews could not react effectively to a force they could not see, could not anticipate, and could not hope to counter. Below deck, the mechanical symphony of war continued with grim efficiency. Turret crews, led by Chief Gunner Samuel Whitaker, 44, moved like parts of a single organism. Shells, each weighing over 2,000 pounds, were loaded into the breaches with precision. The mechanical rammers and hoists synchronized to perfection. Steam hissed from hydraulic systems, valves released under high pressure, and each turret's massive barrel rotated and elevated with calculated exactness. The feedback loop, from radar to fire control to turret, was instantaneous, a silent dialogue between human skill and machine logic. Lieutenant Carson monitored every strobe pulse on the Type 273 echo screen, correcting for deviations as subtle as a few dozen yards. Range minus 400 yards, bearing 320.5, he called, voice calm, yet taut with concentration. Every adjustment translated into a shell that struck closer, sharper, deadlier. The line-spotting operators, stationed on deck with binoculars and spotting scopes, reported the plume of each impact, distances measured and relayed in real time, feeding into the fire control system for immediate recalibration. It was a perfect choreography of destruction, executed under conditions of chaos that would have overwhelmed lesser crews. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So, if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The bridge of the Iowa was a theater of controlled intensity. Captain Harrington remained a pillar of calm, eyes sweeping the horizon, noting patterns of movement, assessing which vessels were sinking, which were still a threat, and when to adjust targets. His decades of experience at sea informed each command, yet the technology beneath his command extended his perception far beyond natural limits. Radar returns, firing tables, and strobe data combined into a comprehensive battlefield picture processed by human intellect into decisions that would alter the course of the engagement. Harrington's subtle nods and brief orders, adjust bearing by 2 degrees starboard, increase salvo interval to 5 seconds, were followed with precision, each action amplifying the effectiveness of the ship's tremendous firepower. Around him, officers moved with synchronized purpose, aware that the slightest hesitation could reduce accuracy or, worse, endanger the crew. Yet, within the tension, there was a rhythm, a sense of inevitability that the Iowa's fire would continue to dominate. Across the Japanese fleet, chaos and disbelief reached a crescendo. Explosions erupted without warning. Decks collapsed, superstructures twisted under repeated impacts. Communications were fragmented, messages garbled, as crews attempted to coordinate evasive maneuvers that had already been predicted and countered by the Iowa's radar calculations. Attempts to fire back were largely ineffective, shells arcing harmlessly into empty water, missing targets entirely as the American guns adjusted instantaneously for every course change. Officers and sailors alike were forced into improvisation, but improvisation could not overcome precision guided by technology. Each passing minute magnified the disparity, where one side relied on vision and reaction, the other combined sight with the predictive power of radar, the discipline of training, and the relentless execution of orders. What had been a conventional naval engagement transformed into an orchestrated storm of steel and fire, one where the outcome had been determined by the invisible hand of superior technology. As the minutes stretched, the Iowa's guns continued their unrelenting cadence. Chief Gunner Whitaker called out intervals to maintain tempo, his voice a grounding presence amid the thunder and smoke. Each gun crew moved with practiced efficiency, ramming, loading, and firing shells with the precision that only years of drills and experience could produce. Lieutenant Carson monitored ammunition levels, calculating remaining capacity and ensuring that each target received optimal attention. Shells remaining, 76. Targeting still optimal, he reported, voice tight with excitement and barely contained exhilaration. Harrington allowed himself the briefest of smiles, acknowledging the culmination of preparation, strategy, and execution. It was the power of modern naval warfare in its purest form, the convergence of technology, discipline, and courage, expressed in a torrent of fire that reshaped the battlefield in minutes. Smoke and flame mingled with the early morning mist, creating a surreal tableau over the water. Columns of fire erupted from enemy vessels, the horizon streaked with smoke that curled and twisted in the wind. The sound of artillery, a continuous thunder rolling across the waves, reverberated through the ship, shaking railings, rattling compartments, and setting the air vibrating with kinetic energy. Sailors held fast to deck fittings, eyes scanning for sudden threats, ears straining to distinguish orders from explosions. Below deck, the mechanical systems of the Iowa responded flawlessly, hydraulic pressure maintained, shells positioned, turrets aligned and fired in seamless succession. Every element, human and mechanical, combined into a singular force, executing orders with ruthless efficiency and leaving a trail of destruction that extended for miles across the water. The sea itself seemed to respond, waves breaking against debris, smoke plumes dancing with wind, and the sun beginning to rise over a battlefield transformed beyond recognition. By 0615 hours, the engagement reached an apex. The Japanese fleet, already shattered and demoralized, attempted to regroup, but formations were broken beyond repair. Fires raged across multiple decks, superstructures collapsed under repeated impact, and the psychological toll on the enemy crew became evident in their frantic movements and shouted commands. Optical systems had failed, and radar-directed gunnery had made conventional tactics irrelevant. The Iowa's crew, however, remained in perfect synchronization, guided by experience, instinct, and technology. Each salvo reinforced the pattern of dominance, each observation refined targeting, and every round fired ensured that the enemy had no opportunity to recover. The magnitude of destruction, delivered with surgical precision, would leave a permanent mark on naval history, a testament to the fusion of human skill and technological innovation. Harrington's mind, ever analytical, assessed not only the immediate tactical situation, but also potential strategic implications. He noted which enemy vessels remained operational, calculated the time required to neutralize them, and anticipated reinforcement scenarios. Each decision, informed by real-time radar feedback and his decades of experience, ensured that the Iowa maintained both offensive superiority and defensive security. Lieutenant Carson and his team adjusted targeting tables, cross-referencing strobe pulses and line spotting reports to maintain an unbroken chain of accuracy. Every impact was confirmed, every deviation corrected, and the deadly feedback loop continued unabated. The Iowa was no longer simply a battleship. It had become an instrument of precise, unstoppable force, translating data into destruction with flawless efficiency. By 0630 hours, the engagement had effectively concluded. Over 300 shells had been fired, each one guided by radar, calculated by fire control, and executed by the disciplined hands of the Iowa's crew. Enemy vessels were destroyed, scattered or ablaze, their formations obliterated, and their ability to resist effectively nullified. The American sailors, weary yet exhilarated, stood amidst smoke and residue of gunpowder, aware of their role in a decisive demonstration of modern naval warfare. Captain Harrington allowed himself a measured breath, knowing that every action had been deliberate, every order precise, and that the morning's victory was a product not of luck, but of meticulous preparation, technological innovation, and unwavering discipline. The thunder had been unleashed, and its echoes would resonate long after the smoke cleared, a permanent testament to the power of foresight, coordination, and human resolve in the face of overwhelming force. Despite the overwhelming mechanical precision of the USS Iowa, the engagement was far from devoid of human tension. Below the steel decks, amid the scent of salt water and gunpowder, the shell crews moved with a combination of deliberate focus and almost superhuman speed, each member executing tasks that demanded both physical strength and mental acuity. Every shell tray had to be perfectly aligned, every powder bag positioned for immediate use, and every turret lever manipulated with the utmost care. A single misstep, a misaligned shell, a delayed command, a misjudged timing could result in catastrophic consequences. Yet, the men moved with a practiced fluidity, honed by countless drills that blurred the line between instinct and training. The radar, sophisticated as it was, did not replace the human element. Rather, it amplified it, providing eyes and data that allowed the sailors' expertise to achieve results that mere mechanical precision could not accomplish on its own. The hum of machinery, the clank of steel, and the rhythmic motion of the crew blended into a symphony of controlled chaos, a testament to years of preparation and the rigor of discipline under fire. In the plotting room, Lieutenant James Carson, 37, remained a pillar of calm amidst the storm. His eyes scanned charts, plotted courses, and monitored the Type 273 and Type 284 radar readouts, translating every pulse and echo into actionable commands. The enemy attempted evasive maneuvers, their formations shifting with desperate attempts at survival, but every change in bearing was instantaneously captured by the radar, recalculated with precision by the fire control table, and communicated to the turret crews without delay. "Adjust elevation by 2 degrees port. Fire!" Carson barked, his voice carrying authority through the confined space. The massive 16-inch guns responded with immediate obedience, hurling shells that tore through the morning mist with devastating accuracy. Each explosion against the enemy hull was a perfect synthesis of technology and human execution, a brutal validation of training, nerve, and coordination. The plotters, line spotters, and radar operators moved as extensions of each other, their efforts meshing seamlessly with the physical labor of those at the guns, demonstrating that modern naval warfare relied as much on human skill as it did on machines. On the Japanese vessels, the surreal nature of the attack became increasingly apparent. Officers attempted to coordinate defensive maneuvers, signaling orders with flags, lights, and hand gestures. But the American shells arrived with terrifying unpredictability, often detonating miles from visual confirmation, and with such force that the Japanese could only react in confusion. "It's impossible!" shouted one officer, his voice trembling as he pointed at a burning cruiser that had vanished from his line of sight in mere seconds. "They cannot see us, yet they destroy us." His words captured the essence of the encounter, for while the Americans were equally blind to the exact positions of their targets in the haze, the radar acted as a surrogate eye, translating electrical pulses into lethal precision. The concept was nearly incomprehensible to the crews, relying on centuries-old naval tactics. A battle fought not by sight alone, but by the interplay of observation, calculation, and instantaneous execution. The human element, refined and disciplined, worked in tandem with the technology to create an effect that seemed almost supernatural, yet was rooted entirely in meticulous preparation and flawless teamwork. By the 7th minute of engagement, the Iowa had unleashed nearly 200 shells, each one a calculated instrument of destruction. Japanese vessels burned with intense heat, listing heavily to one side, and several had already begun to sink beneath the grey waves. The once proud formations of the enemy fleet were reduced to chaotic fragments, scattered across the horizon, as smoke and fire blurred the distinction between ship and sea. The Iowa, by contrast, moved as if dancing across the water, her massive guns still tracking invisible targets with mathematical precision. Each turret rotation, each shell fired, was a testament not only to mechanical engineering, but to the human intelligence guiding it. Sailors exchanged glances of disbelief and awe, some clenching their fists in silent triumph, others gripping railings as they absorbed the intensity of the moment. It was not merely brute force on display, it was the synthesis of power, control, strategy, and vision, manifested through the discipline and courage of every man on board. Below decks, the physical strain on the crew was immense. Chief Gunner Samuel Whitaker, 44, supervised the loading of shells, coordinating the movement of tons of steel and explosive powder through narrow passages with precision that could only come from years of experience. Sweat poured down his face, muscles strained, yet his voice remained clear and authoritative as he called out commands to ensure timing and alignment were perfect. Each shell was checked, each powder charge verified, and each turret lever engaged at precisely the right moment. Mistakes were intolerable, yet the crew executed flawlessly, a testament to countless hours of repetition and the intimate familiarity of their roles. Even the slightest lapse could have resulted in catastrophic misfires or accidental detonations. Yet, the men moved with such synchronization that the enormous vessel seemed like a living entity, its body of steel and fire responding seamlessly to the minds guiding it. Carson, meanwhile, continued to feed data to the director control tower, eyes darting between the radar screen and plotting charts. The Japanese maneuvers were frantic but predictable in their desperation. Every course correction was anticipated, every potential evasive strategy calculated. He shouted corrections, small adjustments in bearing, slight modifications in elevation, and the turrets responded instantly, guided by both human muscle and computerized precision. The harmony of man and machine was on full display, as radar pulses, mechanical gears, and human decisions converged into a relentless storm of calculated destruction. The explosions on the enemy vessels were counted, reported, and fed back into the fire control calculations, creating an unbroken feedback loop of accuracy and lethal efficiency. For the crew of the Iowa, there was a surreal satisfaction in witnessing the results of their preparation and discipline manifest in such undeniable effectiveness. The Japanese sailors, increasingly desperate, attempted to mount counterattacks, but their optical rangefinders were useless in the haze, and their gunnery was disoriented by the invisible threat. Shells fired in their direction often fell harmlessly into open water, while every movement of their ships was already anticipated and countered by radar-directed fire. Officers barked orders, attempting to coordinate their vessels, but the technology-driven human precision of the Iowa rendered these efforts futile. Sailors on the Japanese ships screamed as explosions ripped through decks, waves of heat and force throwing men from one side of the vessel to another. Fear, confusion, and disbelief intertwined as they realized that conventional tactics no longer applied. The rules of engagement had been rewritten in real time by a combination of human skill and technological innovation that seemed nearly magical in its effects. By 0620 hours, the cumulative effect of nearly 200 shells became undeniable. Fires raged uncontrollably aboard enemy ships, superstructures twisted and collapsed, and vessels began to founder with alarming rapidity. The Iowa's deck crews, in contrast, moved with calm precision, each member performing a specific role in a well-rehearsed ballet of destruction. The synergy of human effort and radar guidance was evident in every action. A gun crew would fire, a line spotter would observe, the fire control team would adjust, and the next salvo would strike with unwavering accuracy. This cyclical process, repeated minute after minute, ensured that the Iowa's dominance remained absolute. Sailors exchanged glances that combined fatigue with exhilaration, aware of the magnitude of their achievement. What they were witnessing was not merely a victory of firepower, but a triumph of coordination, planning, and the human spirit. Each man, on deck and below, was a vital component of a machine whose effectiveness depended equally on mental acuity, physical capability, and unwavering discipline. The thunderous roar of artillery, the vibrations running through the hull, and the acrid scent of gunpowder were all reminders that, despite advanced technology, it was the human element that allowed precision, adaptability, and decision-making to manifest on the battlefield. By 0630 hours, the engagement had reached a crucial point. The Japanese fleet was effectively neutralized, most vessels ablaze or sinking, their crews demoralized and struggling to comprehend the devastation. The Iowa, though battered by recoil and vibrations, remained a bastion of controlled violence, her human crews seamlessly integrating with radar and fire control systems to maintain dominance. Captain Harrington, 51, acknowledged the work of his officers and crew with a quiet nod, understanding that their combined expertise had achieved an almost unimaginable feat. Lieutenant Carson, monitoring the radar and plotting room, allowed himself a brief exhale, noting that the feedback loops, calculations, and corrections had maintained an unparalleled level of precision. The ship's crew, aware of their accomplishment, continued their disciplined routines, ensuring that every shell fired was accounted for, every turret maintained, and every man positioned for ongoing engagement, if necessary. The human element, often overshadowed by the thunder of artillery and the power of technology, had proven its indispensable role. Without the discipline, courage, and focus of the crew, even the most advanced radar systems could not have delivered the same level of effectiveness. Each sailor, from the youngest deckhand to the seasoned officers, contributed to a lethal symphony that combined data, computation, and physical skill into a coherent and unstoppable force. As the morning lights strengthened, illuminating smoke, fire, and the shattered remnants of enemy formations, it was clear that the integration of human skill and mechanical precision had rewritten the rules of naval engagement. Victory was not merely in firepower, but in the flawless execution of strategy, the relentless application of training, and the courage to act decisively under conditions that would test the nerves of any man. By 0640 hours, nearly 250 shells had been fired, and the Iowa maintained control of the battlefield. The survivors, among the enemy vessels, were scattered, demoralized, and unable to mount a coherent response. The crew of the Iowa, their hands blistered and voices hoarse, continued to perform with mechanical-like precision, aware that the combination of radar guidance and human skill had produced a display of naval warfare unmatched in history. Captain Harrington observed the outcome, understanding that the morning's actions would not only be remembered for their tactical brilliance, but also for the demonstration of what disciplined, coordinated human effort could achieve when integrated seamlessly with technology. The thunderous cadence of artillery, the chaos of smoke and fire, and the relentless precision of human and machine had combined to create a decisive and unforgettable engagement. As the 8th minute began, the final salvo thundered from the Iowa's 16-inch guns, smoke and flame enveloping the shattered Japanese line and leaving only debris floating in the water. Radar operators remained vigilant, sweeping tirelessly to ensure no surviving vessel escaped undetected. The Type 273 and Type 284 systems had worked together flawlessly, a symphony of electrical signals, echoes, and precise corrections translating invisible data into deadly accuracy. The battleship itself seemed alive, responding to the touch of its crew and the unseen currents of information streaming into its heart. Captain Thomas Harrington, 51, stood on the bridge, eyes scanning the devastation. "Signal headquarters," he commanded, his voice steady. Enemy fleet neutralized. No further engagement necessary. Below decks, the crew exhaled collectively, adrenaline giving way to exhaustion, the realization settling in that they had witnessed the impossible. 200 shells, fired in 8 minutes, each guided with uncanny precision. Far across the Pacific, Japanese commanders radioed frantically, attempting to comprehend the magnitude of their loss. Reports described ships destroyed without warning, shells striking accurately despite haze and distance, and the sudden annihilation of vessels once thought untouchable. Logs would later record that a single battleship had wrought destruction no fleet should have endured. On the Iowa, sailors celebrated quietly, knowing the truth. This was not magic, but the product of rigorous training, advanced technology, and perfect timing. 8 minutes had reshaped the battle, rewritten expectations, and sent an unmistakable message. The U.S. Navy had become a force of both power and inevitability. Years later, the USS Iowa rested at dock, its salt-stained hull and sun-faded paint transformed into polished steel that gleamed in the afternoon sun. Visitors wandered across the deck, unaware of the history embedded beneath their feet. Plaques commemorated battles, crew members' names and honors, but few could truly grasp the magnitude of what had occurred during those 8 fateful minutes. Lieutenant James Carson, now retired and 77, walked the deck quietly, his fingers tracing the edges of the old plotting table, remembering the tension, the rhythm, and the flawless precision that had defined that day. 200 shells, he whispered to himself, a faint smile touching his lips. 8 minutes, never again will it be just us and the horizon. The radar screens that once guided destruction had long since vanished, replaced by informational guides for curious tourists. Yet, the memory endured. The invisible eyes, the unseen hands, and the human determination that had fused technology into an unstoppable force remained alive in stories, photographs, and the echoes of history that lingered in the steel itself. Across the Pacific, the Japanese officers involved had long since passed, but within archived reports and war diaries, they continued to marvel at the seemingly impossible, a single battleship firing relentlessly, directed by invisible guidance, annihilating an entire fleet with a precision that defied comprehension. It was more than an act of war. It marked the dawn of a new era, a testament to human ingenuity, an undeniable proof that when mind and machine moved as one, even the horizon itself could be conquered. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.